Everyone remembers the woman who was corrected in her own kitchen. Almost nobody remembers that she is the one who said the sentence that made Peter famous, the sentence about who Jesus was. Her name was Martha. She lived in a village called Bethany, on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives, about 2.8 kilometers from Jerusalem in the 1st century. She ran a household, and for a stretch of years the Gospels never bother to explain. Jesus had a place to sleep when he came south because of her. Luke gives her 4 verses and a mild correction. John gives her a confession of faith that the church built monuments on when it came out of Peter's mouth instead. For the next half hour, I want to take you inside that house. Not the story about the house. The stone, the water, the bread, the single lamp, what it actually cost a woman to keep that door open. We start before sunrise. It is still dark when the fire is lit. The room is smaller than you are imagining. The walls are limestone, quarried out of the slope this village stands on, bedded in mud mortar, and they hold the cold of the night well past sunrise. The floor is beaten earth. Overhead, wooden beams carry a roof of brushwood packed with clay, and in the corner of the courtyard lies a short stone cylinder with a socket cut for a handle, a roller used to press that roof flat again after every rain. Rollers like it have been recovered from excavations across this region. There is one light, a small clay lamp, wheel-made, with a splayed nozzle, burning olive oil through a flax wick. It gives about as much light as a single candle. That is the reason everyone in a house like this gathers into one room after sundown. There is only one place where you can see. A woman is kneeling at a hand mill. The upper stone is basalt, dark and rough and porous, carried down from the north because the local limestone is too smooth to grind well. She turns it, and the barley comes out coarse under her hands, and this will take the better part of 2 hours before the dough can even be started. The oven outside is a clay dome heated with brushwood and dried dung, and it must be hot before the household wakes. This is not a special morning. This is every morning. This is Bethany, and John's Gospel gives the distance to Jerusalem with unusual precision, about 15 stadia in chapter 11, verse 18. The century is the 1st. Tiberius rules in Rome. Pontius Pilate governs Judea as prefect, a fact confirmed not only by written sources, but by a limestone block recovered at Caesarea in 1961 that carries his name. Joseph Caiaphas holds the high priesthood in the city over the ridge. The woman at the mill is Martha. This is an ordinary morning. The village she lived in still exists. It is called Al-Azariah, and the Arabic name preserves the name of Lazarus, a piece of evidence in itself, because it means the identification of this site is old and unbroken. Between 1949 and 1953, excavations directed by the Franciscan archaeologist Sylvester Saller worked through the ground there. What came up was rock-cut tombs, pottery and lamps spanning roughly the 1st century before Christ into the 1st century after, and the stacked remains of successive churches beginning in the 4th century. That is what the archaeology establishes. A village inhabited in exactly the period we are talking about. It does not establish which house was hers. No excavation has ever identified the house of Martha, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. What archaeology gives us instead is better than a single building. It gives us the type, and the type is remarkably well documented. Yizhar Hirschfeld catalogued the dwellings of Roman-period Palestine, and a village household of the kind the Gospels describe comes out somewhere between 40 and 80 square meters of roofed space. 2 to 4 rooms opening onto a yard. Hold that number. It creates a problem later that the text refuses to solve for us. And notice where the center of that house actually is. not the room, the courtyard. The open yard is where the grinding happens, where the oven sits, where the wool is spun, and the animals are kept. The roofed rooms are for sleeping and storage. Most of a woman's life in this village was lived outdoors. Then there is the water, and the water changes everything. Bethany has no spring, no well at the center of the village, no stream down the slope, nothing. Every household depended on cisterns, pits cut into the rock, plastered to hold, filled by the winter rains from October into February, and drawn down through 6 dry months. Every liter in Martha's house had been caught off a roof and hauled up on a rope. Sit with that for a moment, because it reframes the entire subject of this video. When the Gospels say that Martha received guests, they are describing a woman spending water she could not replace until the rains came back. So let us walk her through a day. She is awake before light at the mill. The Hebrew word is rekayim, and she stays there 2 hours or more. Then the dough, then the oven, a tabun, a clay dome, or a tanner, a cylinder, heated from within until the walls glow and the flattened loaves can be slapped against them. Barley bread for ordinary households. Wheat, if the house is doing well. Around that bread, lentils, chickpeas, onions, and garlic. Olives and olive oil in everything. Figs, fresh in season, and dried the rest of the year. Salted fish carried up from the Sea of Galilee. Meat appeared for festivals and for guests who mattered, and not otherwise. Then water to be carried. Then wool spun on a drop spindle, standing, walking, talking, never finished. And out of that wool comes the tunic she is wearing, sewn from 2 rectangles and belted at the waist. Then the fire kept alive. Then, in season, the olives. And where does everyone sleep? Here the Bible answers a question we did not know we had asked. In Luke chapter 11, Jesus tells a story about a man knocking on a neighbor's door at midnight, needing bread because a traveler has arrived unexpectedly. The voice from inside answers. In verse 7, "The door is now shut, and my children are with me in bed. I cannot get up and give you anything. The children are in bed with me." 1 room. That is Martha's house too. 1 sleeping platform, raised at one end of the main space, where the whole household lay down together on mats and folded mattresses, near the animals in the cold months, because the animals gave off heat. Bedding rolled and stored by day, the lamp burning low all night rather than going out. And a guest slept in that same room, unless the house was large enough for something better. Which brings us to the one piece of furniture this whole video is named after. There was a better arrangement, and the Bible describes it exactly once, in a passage we come back to at the end for entirely different reasons. 2 Kings chapter 4. A woman of substance in Shunem notices that the prophet Elisha keeps passing through, and she says, in verse 10, "Let us make a small roof chamber with walls, and put there for him a bed, a table, a chair, and a lamp." A bed, a table, a chair, a lamp. The Hebrew word for that chamber is aliyah. In Greek it becomes hyperon, or anagaion, a room built on the flat roof, walled and roofed separately, reached by the outside stair. Tabitha is laid in one in Acts chapter 9. And the room where the Last Supper was eaten is called by that same word in Mark chapter 14, verse 15, a large upper room, furnished and ready. Now, did Martha's house have one? The honest answer is that nobody knows, and the Gospels never say. Neither Luke nor John describes the inside of Martha's house at all. Not one wall, not one object. What we can say is what such a room was, and that a household receiving the same traveling guest again and again is precisely the situation 2 Kings chapter 4 is describing. That is as far as the evidence carries, and this channel does not go further than the evidence carries. Let me stop here and ask you something, because this next part is going to be about work, and I suspect some of you have been feeling this for the last 10 minutes. You know somebody who does this. Maybe it is you. The person who is up before everyone else, who has already done 2 hours of unseen labor before anybody else in the house has opened their eyes, and who will be thanked for none of it because the work only becomes visible when it stops. The bread appears. The room is warm. Nobody asks how. If that is your life right now, or if it was your mother's life, or your grandmother's, I want you to tell me in the comments, not a general thought, the specific person. Who kept your house running while nobody watched? I read these, and I would like to know their name. Now let us talk about what Martha actually did when a guest crossed her threshold, because this is the part the Gospels preserve in surprising detail, and they preserve it, oddly enough, by describing a man who failed to do it. Luke chapter 7. Jesus is a guest in the house of a Pharisee named Simon, and at the end of the episode he turns to his host and lists, item by item, what was not done for him. Verses 44 to 46. You gave me no water for my feet. You gave me no kiss. You did not anoint my head with oil. 3 things. That is the inventory. Water at the threshold. A kiss of greeting. Formal reception, not affection, which is exactly why Luke chapter 22, verse 48, lands the way it does. Oil on the head, an honor paid to the person who made the journey. Abraham offers the same 3 things to his visitors in Genesis chapter 18. And hold on to one thing about the first of them. Washing feet was the lowest work in the house, done by a servant or by the lowest ranking person under that roof. A host of standing arranged for it. He did not kneel down and do it himself. Remember that. Everything Simon the Pharisee neglected, Martha of Bethany did, repeatedly. For a traveling group, with cistern water she could not replace until winter. So let us put it back together, in the right house, with the right woman. The Gospels never stage this scene for us, but every element in it is documented, and the arithmetic is not complicated. It is late afternoon. The light on the eastern slope goes gold, and then goes fast, and the group coming up from Jericho has been climbing most of the day, 1,000 meters of ascent, on a road with a reputation. They are dust to the knee. Their feet, inside open leather sandals, have been in that dust since morning. Martha hears them before she sees them, because sound carries on a slope. The water is already drawn. It came out of a cistern that will not refill until the winter rains, and she has measured what she can spare, and she has decided what it is for. At the threshold, the sandals come off, and somebody in that house kneels down, because this is the lowest work there is, and washes the road off the feet of men who have walked 27 kilometers. Then the kiss of greeting. Formal, not affectionate, the sign that says you are received here. Then oil worked into the hair and across the face of a man who has been in dry heat since dawn. Then he sits down. That is the whole of it. Water, greeting, oil, and a place to sit. 3 gestures and a floor. And in a village with no spring, at the end of a dry summer, those 3 gestures mean one thing. Somebody looked at what was left in the cistern and decided this person was worth it. And here is the question that scene raises and cannot answer. Mark chapter 11, verse 11, says that Jesus went out to Bethany with the 12. 13 men do not sleep in a house of 40 to 80 square meters. Whether the group spread across several households in the village, or camped on the slope with the pilgrims, or whether this house was simply much larger than the village norm. The text doesn't say, and I am not going to invent an answer for you. What we do know is who was standing at that door. And there was one day a week when none of it could happen. And that day tells us something about this house that people almost always miss. Bethany was too far from Jerusalem to reach on a Sabbath. The Sabbath limit, as reckoned in the Damascus Document, a text from this period, though a sectarian one, stricter than mainstream practice, runs to something between 880 and 900 meters. Bethany sat at roughly 3 times that distance, which means that on the 7th day, Martha's household did not go to the temple. The temple was over the hill and out of reach. The Sabbath was kept in that house. And a Sabbath kept at home is a Sabbath prepared the day before. Exodus chapter 16, verse 23, has the food baked and boiled in advance. Exodus chapter 35, verse 3, forbids kindling a fire in the dwellings on the day itself. So Martha's mill stood still. Her oven went cold. Her bread was made on the 6th day, and her lamp was lit before the sun went down, because after sundown it could not be lit at all. The Gospels have a name for that 6th day. They call it the Day of Preparation, in Greek, pariskew, in Mark chapter 15, verse 42, and Luke chapter 23, verse 54. We usually read that word as a piece of chronology. It is also a description of a woman's Friday. The year outside moved too, and the ridge is named for what grows on it. Olives from September into November. Barley cut around Passover, wheat at Pentecost, and the 2 rains that decide everything. Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 14, names both, the early rain in autumn and the later one in spring, filling those cisterns against the dry months coming. The next village along that same ridge is called Bethphage, and the name means house of unripe figs. And on the road between Bethany and Jerusalem, Mark chapter 11 records Jesus coming to a fig tree in leaf and finding nothing on it, with Mark noting, in verse 13, that it was not the season for figs. The agricultural calendar of that exact stretch of road is sitting inside the text, which brings us to the road. Bethany is the last village before the summit of the Mount of Olives, and Luke chapter 10 assumes that road and its reputation when it sends a man down from Jerusalem to Jericho and has him fall among robbers. From Martha's door to the city was 2.8 kilometers, but up and over that ridge, because the summit stands higher than both the village and the temple platform. 3/4 of an hour on foot, each way. Everything that house bought or sold went over that hill, and once a year, the arithmetic of the whole region changed. How many people lived in Jerusalem in this period is disputed, and I am going to give you a range rather than pretend to a number. Somewhere between 25 and 40,000 residents, depending on which reconstruction you follow. Joachim Jeremias at the lower end, others considerably higher. The enormous Passover figure in Josephus, in the 6th book of the Jewish War, is treated by essentially everyone as inflated, and I am not going to use it. What is agreed is the direction. At Passover, the population multiplied several times over, and the overflow slept in the surrounding villages and camped across the slopes of the Mount of Olives, which reframes something. When Matthew chapter 21, verse 17, says that Jesus left the city and lodged in Bethany, we tend to read that as a retreat, a hiding place, a man withdrawing beyond the reach of the authorities. It was not. It was what everyone did. The village filled with pilgrims every spring, and hundreds of households absorbed the flood. Martha's house was one of them. What makes it different is not secrecy. It is that we know her name. Now to the scene almost everyone has heard, and heard flattened. Luke chapter 10, verse 38. Martha welcomes Jesus into her house. Notice the grammar. It is her house, she receives him, and in neither Luke nor John is there any mention of a husband, a father, or any man functioning as head of that household. The text is silent about why. People have proposed widowhood. People have proposed that she was the eldest of 3 unmarried siblings. Both are guesses, and I will label them as guesses. Her name, incidentally, is Aramaic. Marta, the feminine of Mar, Lord, Master. It means, quite literally, mistress of the house. For a woman who appears in Scripture precisely as a householder, that is a striking thing to be called. Verse 39. Mary sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. That phrase is technical. Sitting at a teacher's feet is the posture of a disciple under instruction. Paul uses the identical expression about himself under Gamaliel in Acts chapter 22, verse 3. Luke is telling us that a woman took a disciple's place and that Jesus defended it. That is the historical weight of this scene, and it is usually missed entirely. Verse 40. Martha is distracted with much serving. The Greek verb behind, distracted, perispaomai, means to be pulled in several directions at once. The word behind serving is diakonia, the same root that will shortly name an office in the church. And then the correction, gentle and specific. One thing is necessary. Read carefully. That is not a verdict against hospitality. It is a ruling about what may be set down in a particular hour. And we know it is not a verdict against hospitality because of what she is doing the next time we see her. But first, the worst 4 days of her life. John chapter 11. Lazarus is ill. The sisters send word. And verse 5 says something we should not read past. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Martha named first. Then verse 6. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. The delay is deliberate, and the gospel says so without apology. By the time he arrives, Lazarus has been in the tomb 4 days. And here is the detail that changes the emotional physics of the whole scene. Verse 19 says that many of the Judeans had come out from Jerusalem to console the sisters. Verse 31 has them still inside, sitting with her. Do you know what a house of mourning sounded like in the 1st century? It was loud. Matthew chapter 9, verse 23, describes flute players and a crowd making a commotion inside the house of a dead girl. Professional mourners were engaged. Jeremiah chapter 9 refers to skilled wailing women. Garments were torn. Mourners sat on the ground. Job chapter 2 has his friend 7 days and 7 nights on the ground beside him, saying nothing at all. 7 days is the standard span in Genesis chapter 50 and 1 Samuel chapter 31. The detailed rabbinic codification of mourning practice comes later, after the year 200, and I flag that because it is often quoted as though it were 1st century law. So put the pieces together. For 4 days, that small house has been full of strangers, full of noise, full of people who arrived from the city and have to be fed and given water from a cistern that will not refill until winter. 4 days of professional weeping in a 40 square meter house. And in verse 20, Martha goes out. She leaves that house, leaves the noise and the crowd and the obligations of it, and walks out along the road to meet him. And what she says when she reaches him is the most human sentence in the Gospel of John. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. That is grief with an edge on it. And then, in the same breath, verse 22. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. He tells her that her brother will rise. And she answers in verse 24 that she knows he will rise in the resurrection on the last day. That answer is not improvised. It is standard Pharisaic doctrine, a general resurrection at the end of the age, which Josephus describes and which the Sadducees rejected, as Acts chapter 23 notes. A village woman in Bethany is quoting the settled theology of her day correctly. And then he says the thing, and then she says hers. Verse 27, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world." Stop there. I told you at the start that she said the sentence that made Peter famous. This is it. Go and read Matthew chapter 16, verse 16. Peter at Caesarea Philippi, the confession the church has built monuments on. Now read John chapter 11, verse 27 again. Same confession. In John's Gospel, it is not on Peter's lips. It is on the lips of the woman who was too busy in the kitchen. And she is still herself at the tomb, which is why I love this account. Verse 39, when he tells them to take the stone away. Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days. That is the most practical line spoken by anybody in the chapter, and it comes from exactly the person you would expect it from. Then the last time we see her, John chapter 12, verse 2. 6 days before Passover, in Bethany, they gave a dinner. And the text says, Martha served, still serving. Nobody had talked her out of it. It was never the problem. One detail about that dinner. The verb John uses for Lazarus at the table means reclining, banquet posture around a low table. Ordinary daily eating in a village house was done sitting. This was a feast, and in verse 5, the perfume Mary pours out is valued at 300 denarii, and Matthew chapter 20, verse 2, tells us a denarius was a laborer's wage for a day. 300 days of a working man's life in one jar in that room. Now I want to show you why this house is not an accident of history. There is a woman in the Old Testament whose story runs so close to Martha's that once you have seen it, you cannot unsee it. 2 Kings chapter 4, the same chapter that gave us the roof chamber. A woman of substance in Shunem notices a prophet passing through and begins feeding him. Then she builds him that room, so he has somewhere to sleep whenever he comes. She is the host, the arrangement is hers. Then her son dies in her arms. And she does not wait in the house. She saddles a donkey, and she rides out, and she meets the prophet on the road. And she says to his face exactly what she thinks. And the child is given back to her. A woman who hosts, a death inside her household, and a woman who goes out to meet him rather than waiting to be visited. John chapter 11, verse 20 sits directly on top of that. There is an older pattern still in Genesis chapter 18. Abraham sees 3 visitors and hurries. The text keeps using that word. And water is brought for their feet, and Sarah is set to making bread. Hospitality at speed and at real cost. And in the middle of that meal comes an announcement of life, where life had become impossible. Sarah laughs because it is absurd. Martha, at a sealed tomb, raises the practical objection about the smell. Both of them are answered anyway. And behind both, the promise in Ezekiel chapter 37, Behold, I will open your graves and raise you from your graves, O my people. That was spoken to a nation in exile. About a nation. I am not going to tell you Ezekiel was predicting Lazarus. That is not how the passage works. But the shape of it is the shape of what happened on that hillside. A stone moved, and someone walked out. So what is left of that village now? Al-Izariah is still there, and the Arabic name still carries Lazarus in it. The tomb shown to visitors as the tomb of Lazarus is attested from the 4th century. Eusebius of Caesarea records the place in his Onomasticon in the 320s. Egeria, the pilgrim whose diary dates to the early 380s, describes the liturgy held there. So the identification is ancient and continuous, and I want to be precise about what that means. It is a tradition of great age. It is not an archaeologically verified fact, and no honest account will tell you it is. As for Martha herself, the New Testament simply stops. After John chapter 12, there is nothing. Not in Acts, not in the letters, nothing. 2 later traditions try to fill the gap, and both should be dated out loud. A legend from Provence places Martha at Tarascon. It appears in the 12th and 13th centuries, more than 1,000 years after she lived. An Eastern tradition places Lazarus and his sisters on Cyprus, attested in Byzantine sources from around the 9th and 10th centuries. Neither is history. Both are the Church wanting to know and not knowing. We do not know what happened to her. The revolt of 66 to 70 devastated this region, and Roman forces camped on the Mount of Olives during the siege of Jerusalem. Whether that household or that village survived it, no source tells us. Which leaves us with the house, and one last thing. There is a sentence of Jesus in Luke chapter 9, verse 58, that people quote often and rarely finish thinking about. Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Read that, and then look back up the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives, at a limestone house with a courtyard and a cistern, and a woman who had bread ready. That sentence has an exception in it. The exception has an address. And on the last night, in an upper room in the city over the ridge, John chapter 13 records that he took a basin and a towel and washed his disciples' feet. The exact task Luke chapter 7 says a host owes a guest at the door. The task that in Bethany fell to Martha, the guest for once doing the host's work, and the disciples not knowing where to look. He had learned that gesture somewhere. Somebody had knelt at a threshold with a basin for him, more times than anyone counted. The one line most people remember about Martha is a mild correction in a kitchen. The line almost nobody remembers is the greatest confession of faith spoken by any woman in the Gospels, and it is hers. She has been remembered for her interruption and forgotten for her faith. That is exactly what happens to people who serve. Their work is invisible while it is being done, and their depth is invisible because everyone is looking at the work. And there is the other thing she said, the one that does not resolve. Lord, if you had been here, if you have ever prayed in a hospital corridor, you have said that sentence, perhaps this week. The gospel does not soften it, and I am not going to soften it either. But John did not stop the verse there. She says it, and then she says, but even now. I do not know what your even now is. I know she said it standing on a road, 4 days too late, with a house full of mourners behind her. If there is somebody in your life who has been serving quietly and has not been thanked for it, send them this video today. It might do more than a message would. And if you want to keep walking through the 1st century with us, through these houses, these roads, these ordinary people whose names survived, subscribe and stay. There are more houses on this hillside than one, and we are going to open them. So here is what I would like to hear from you. Not what you think about Martha. What you would have said, standing on that road, if you had been the one who walked out of the house to meet him. Tell me below.